Mofield, and we're again recording for the State Archives in Frankfort, for the Pogue Library at Murray State University, and for the Marshall County Library, the program being paid for and produced by WCBL Radio in Benton, Kentucky, Shelby McCallum owner. We're visiting in Holland today, and we're right now in the home of Mrs. F.G. Holland, Fray Holland, to her close friends. It's a real pleasure to be with her, and to start off, we may get slapped, but we generally ask all of our ladies this, and we haven't yet. If you mind telling us how old you are.
I am 79 of September the 17th.
79 years young. Well, good. That's fine. And Miss Holland, were you born in Marshall County?
Yes, I was born near Birmingham in Marshall County, out in the country from Birmingham, about a mile and a half.
That's where the old showboats used to come, isn't
Yes.
it? Oh, that's wonderful. And you, could you tell us your parents' names?
Yes, my father's name was Rodney McGowan, and he was originally from Graves County by way of Arkansas. His father lived in Arkansas, but he came to Graves County, then came to Marshall County. My mother's name was Melinda Stone McGowan, and she lived in Marshall County.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. Now, for the benefit of genealogists who might use the tape, do you know your grandparents on either side or both?
Yes, my father's father was Tom McGowan. He lived near Paragoula, Arkansas, and that's all I know about him. I never saw him.
Mm-hmm.
But he was alive when I can remember my daddy going to visit him. And my mother's father was John Stone. Her mother died when she was a little girl, and he had remarried.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all I know about him. He died about when Wanda, my youngest daughter, was a baby.
Yeah.
And she's 50 years old now.
Now, obviously, obviously, McGowan, which is spelled M-C, I think,
M-C-G-O-W-A.
must be Irish.
Must be, but I don't really know.
Yeah. You don't know from whence they came here, Virginia, North Carolina, or... Okay.
The only member of the family I saw was when my father died. I was 10 years old, and one of his brothers, Wes McGowan, came to the funeral, and he at that time lived in Fulton, Kentucky, and I've never heard of him since.
All right, you were born, you say, near Birmingham. Do you remember where you first went to school?
Yes. It was called Shoe Fly School, about 2.5 miles from our home.
Well, isn't that wonderful? I believe that's the first time I've heard Shoe Fly School.
But it disappeared a few years later, and was brought out on the Birmingham Highway, known as Cleveland.
Uh-huh.
And so it was the old Cleveland school where we went to school until we moved to Hardin when I was 13.
Oh, that's fine. Do you remember any of your teachers?
Yes.
Maybe, perhaps the first one or a few of them?
I remember Mamie Beasley and Hugh Downs.
Hugh Downs.
Yes.
Well, that's a famous name in the broadcast field, isn't it? But no doubt a different person.
Different Hugh. And J.V. Gregory. Those were the ones I had before we came to Hardin, and Roberta Cox, and all those came in later.
Mm-hmm.
Roberta Cox.
Oh, I remember Roberta Cox.
And Ada Donald. She's still living, isn't she? Ada Donald lives at...
I think so.
She lives at Brewers now.
Uh-huh. Well, that is so fine. Now, Shoe Fly School. We've located something there that I hadn't heard before. Although Reed Conner, the superintendent, did tell me yesterday that I believe at its height there were 56 or 7 one-room schools in Marshall County. So the goal then was to have a school within walking distance of each child, and that was interpreted to be that no one would walk farther than 3 miles. Of course.
When it moved up on the highway, up on the Birmingham Road, it wasn't about 3/4 of a mile of our house.
Hmm. So you were one of the real lucky
I was
ones.
lucky. I got to walk just that far. I had
Idea, what was your favorite subject? Reading, writing,
Reading,
or
I
arithmetic?
suppose.
Reading would have been spelling, probably.
no, I wasn't good in spelling.
Wasn't the greatest speller in the
Nope.
world. Okay. All right. Could you tell us something about what the school was like? Was it frame? It wasn't a log building, I don't
No,
suppose.
it was a frame building, and the boys all sat on one side of the road, a side of the house, and the girls on the other side.
Now, I've
And
heard
it
that.
had the 8th grade in there, of course, and when a grade was reciting, they were called up to some benches in the front of the room.
Hmm.
And there they sat and recited to the teacher.
I noticed a historian in something I was reading about Abraham Lincoln. It said he went to the Blab School. And evidently that's what they called it in the early days, because each child went to the front row and they all recited aloud to the teacher.
The way we did.
And each one of the classes, of course, with 8 classes, and some of those classes would have 6, 7 subjects, like reading, writing, arithmetic, spelling, and geography and
when I
history.
was going to school, the 7th and 8th grade was combined, and you had 7th grade one year and 8th grade the next,
Hmm.
and back and forth. And
Yeah.
I believe the 4th and 5th was like that too.
Mhm.
Didn't have every grade every year
Yeah, I can recall when I was in
in
the
rural school.
rural school. I was graduated from a place called Stone in Callaway County in the class of 36, and the teacher actually taught 6 grades each year.
That's what they did.
They went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 one year, and the next year is 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8.
Right.
So that's
They did then.
the way they cut back and made it
Easier
bearable,
and
I guess.
However, there were not too many youngsters in the school. They weren't allowed to have over 30, were they? They weren't too many children going to
I
school.
don't know, but some of the people that I have interviewed told me that, like there were 70 in school at a place. And that must have been an unusual situation. I think
There weren't
most
too
of them
many
ran
in my
about
school.
30 or thereabouts.
There were other schools. See, Birmingham wasn't too far off, and they had school down there, and so
Hmm.
we were close to them. And I don't remember who was the other way.
All right. Do you remember anything about the games you played? And
Oh, yes. We had Two-Eyed Cat,
do you,
Three-Eyed.
do you remember anything about how you played that?
Oh, yes.
Uh-huh.
You had a batter on both ends of a place and the pitcher in the middle and so forth. And if you hit a ball, you had to exchange places.
Mm-hmm.
And if you got caught,
Yeah.
or you had to get out, somebody else, the one that caught you got to take your place.
So it was a type of a ball game.
It's a type of a ball game,
Uh-huh.
yes.
And
I'm sure they were homemade balls, though I'm not too sure about that, but I'm sure we didn't have bought balls.
Well, I was talking to Elizabeth Harrell, and she told me how to make, how they made balls. They wound them up with yarn.
Yeah, I remember the boys would bring them in, but they'd be all wound up with some kind of
Yeah.
strings on the outside.
And sometimes she said that if they had the time and the inclination and the material, they would sew a piece of leather around that to keep it from unraveling. So
I believe they would
quickly.
put something in the center of it to make it bounce a little bit if they could find enough rubber to do that.
yeah, they either put a rubber ball or sometimes a cork
Something
center.
in
I
the
believe
center
she
of it,
said.
I believe. But I never made one.
Well, things are more affluent now. We throw away more then than we now than we lived on in those
Of
days,
course we
I
did.
guess. All right. I suppose you also did things like played hopscotch,
Jump the rope.
jump the rope.
Yes.
You've
I would
had,
play hide and seek sometime, but the teacher didn't like them. We'd want to run off in the woods and hide behind a tree, and soon they'd break that up, make us come back.
yeah.
Teacher didn't like that, us get that way from her.
All right. When you became a young lady, what were some of the things you did for recreation then after getting out, let's say, of elementary school?
Okay. We went to what you call play parties. Did you ever hear of them?
Oh, I certainly have, and I've been to one or two. And
We had play parties occasionally, but usually it was just coming to meet the train and go to the post office after the train came along every night, especially if you're big enough to have a boyfriend.
now, you had moved to Hardin then when you were relatively young?
When I was 13, I came to I was in the 7th grade.
Uh-huh.
And
of
my
course,
sister, older than me, was ready for high school, and had Benton and Hardin were the only two high schools in the county at that time. So we came to Hardin. Hardin was an independent school, so was Benton, not county supported at all then.
Well, I've heard a number of people say that, in fact, I believe Margaret Pace, she was a Trevathan, told me yesterday that her grandfather moved to Hardin specifically so his daughter could go to high school.
That's what we came for.
And in the fall of 1912, and the high school opened, I believe, that fall. They had a new brick building in 1910, and they had set up a high school district. There was only one high school in Callaway County, that was in Murray, independent again, and the one in Benton, an independent district.
And then they established this one evidently. I never knew when it was established, but it was here, a high school, when we came.
And Hardin just grew right along. All right, so play parties, were they a whole lot like square dances?
Yes, they were. Except you didn't have the music.
You could play those?
They could sing, but you didn't have a fiddle.
Oh, I see.
You danced when you had the fiddle.
I see. Well,
I reckon, I don't know.
I've
Mama would let
never-
us dance. No, it's not right.
No, I hadn't fully caught the difference between the two. Someone had told me once that they were similar.
They were.
And so,
I suppose I've never been to one of the dances.
so you didn't have to have the fiddle music in
No.
order to have the play
It
party.
was just a caller.
Mhm.
You'd say change partners and all this, that, and the other, and do-si-do, and that was sort of like the dances, I'm sure.
I know one lady said she remembered something about buffalo gals.
Yeah, I
And
remember hearing
chase the
them.
buffalo. And,
yeah. That was the dance, though, I think, that did that more than the play parties.
well, yeah, okay.
But they were similar form,
Yeah.
yes.
All right, was there anything peculiar about, you said your mother didn't want you to go to dances and so on, and I've heard a great deal of that. Were they stricter on you about dating in those days?
No, not necessarily. I just hadn't thought of it. I can't remember when I didn't have 2 or 3 boys in school that I would grin at, but not dating as such. That was our way of communicating, I suppose.
You had kind of school sweethearts.
Yes,
And so on.
yes.
Yeah. To raise money, a number of people have said that they had box parties and pie suppers and so on. Could you tell us how those went?
Yes, the citizens of the community would bring in the pies and boxes, and they would be auctioned off. And then you ate after your pie had been auctioned off. Fellow in front would auction off and to the highest bidder. It went on like that till they were all sold.
And if you could find out your best girlfriend's pie, then you'd buy that one.
That's right.
Yeah.
You had to eat with her.
Provided somebody else didn't have more money than you had,
Right.
and kind of run it up on you.
Right.
Okay. All right. What did you begin to do first after finishing elementary? You went into high school here at
Yes,
Holland?
went into high school here at Holland. And they were playing girls basketball at that time, too.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a basketball team, and we went to Sharp to play. And I fell and like to broke my neck around the outside goal post, and that was the end of my ball playing.
Yeah. Well, then there was a long period of time when Kentucky did not allow girls basketball, and then
I guess I was
under
about
this
14 or 15 when we were trying to play ball.
the civil rights movement then has gone full circle, and they filed suit saying that they must have girls basketball. And
They
we
did
came back and did right well. I guess they won the state championship last year.
And by the way, that boy that is coaching this ball team went to school to me when I was teaching at North Marshall.
Well, tell us about how you became a teacher. Now, several people have told me that they just finished the 8th grade and went to the county seat and took a test, and they got a teaching certificate right fresh out of the 8th grade.
No,
Did-
I finished high school and went to Bowling Green for one semester and got it. And they issued a teaching certificate. I think it was for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the start of my college career. I'd teach in the fall and winter and then go to school in the spring. And then when they established one at Murray, I finished at Murray after a while. But I went 2 years at Bowling Green,
Mm-hmm.
2 summers and springs.
Yeah.
School was out in the early spring. We'd catch it mid-spring semester and summer semester.
So then you had a degree from Murray State, and you taught, and
Retired in 1970.
all right. Now, along the way, you were married.
Yes.
Could you tell us your husband?
My husband was a teacher also. We taught together. He was principal of the school in Trigg County, in Christian County rather,
Mm-hmm.
in Christian County. And he was principal of the school, and I was the primary teacher, the first grade teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to go in together, of course, and continued until we married.
Now, Mr. Holland, of course, I know him, obviously. I went to school to him myself. And was he from Hardin originally, or?
No, he was originally, the way he told it, he was originally from Trigg County. But when he was about 15, the family moved to Callaway County.
Mm-hmm.
Then they moved to Hardin, the same year we moved to Hardin. And I
Uh-huh.
don't remember, I was 13 when we moved to Hardin. But they lived just down the street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, now he was married, and he had 2 children,
Yes.
Robert and Dorothy. And then his wife died, and then you were married. Now, you also have children, don't you?
Yes, I have 2 children, 2 daughters, Lavora Holland Williams
Mm-hmm.
and Wanda Germain, Wanda Lou Germain, Wanda Holland Germain.
And now, let's see. Wanda lives in Michigan.
Yes.
Lavora lives in
Miss-
Mississippi.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So they don't fight very often.
All right. Well, I shall always, of course, have a great regard for Mr. Holland. He did an awful lot for me. I came back. Of course, Dad was a sharecropper and moved around quite a bit, and we returned to Hardin, where I had been born near here. We returned in January of '38, and I was a sophomore that year. And so I got to know Mr. Holland then. And
He loved teaching. He loved to help young men and boys and girls.
well, he certainly helped me. He gave me a course in typing and a number of other things. And
Wagged his typewriter over at school for you, didn't
oh, that's right. The school didn't own a typewriter,
he
and
took his typewriter over there.
he bought that typewriter and brought it to school and let me use it. I'll never forget that. And many other little things that I could tell, such as if they were having a play, and he'd say, "Ray, do you have the money to come to the play tonight?" And I'd say, "No, I don't have a quarter." And he'd say, well, if you'll move those folding chairs out on the floor. You know, we played basketball in the same place where we had the plays, of course, like everybody did in those days. So I was young and strong. I didn't mind that at all. So I'd move the plays and get a free pass to see the play. And he started us in debate and a good many other things.
Right.
Well, all that is, I suppose, water over the dam. Now, when you were growing up around Hardin, did you live in town or did you live out on a farm at the edge of town, or?
No, I lived in town where Doc Hale lived forever, over on Watkins Street.
So you didn't know anything about setting tobacco and suckering
Well,
and worming? And
No. My daddy just raised one. See, he had several acres of land, and he wasn't too healthy. He died when he was 54. He wasn't too healthy, so he didn't raise any tobacco of his own. He rented his land all out. And that's what kept us going, was that land, what we got from the land after we moved to Hardin after his death. We lived on the farm. What we could get from the farm, corn and tobacco, things that was raised down there was sold. That kept us going.
Okay. What was home life like for a young girl growing up then? Did your mother have tasks for you, like helping can food or
No, she didn't.
quilting, or?
No. We just sort of did what we needed to do at school, and that was it. We came to Hardin to go to school.
Uh-huh.
And so we took care of that, and she did the housework.
All
Well,
right.
we made our own beds, of course.
All right, now, tell us about Hardin as you remember it when you first came here. Do you remember anything about, who the merchants were, the kind of stores there were in Hardin then, and so on?
Yes, I do. Hardin had two big brick stores, 2 stories high, and one was run by Mr. Pace, Mr. East Elder Pace, and his son Ted. And you could get anything from plows to beds and all kinds of material like that. It was a complete store. You didn't have to get out of town to get it. And the other store was run by the midget family. Potts to start with, I think, and then the midget family. And we didn't have to get out of town to shop at all unless we just wanted to. Sometimes we'd catch a train to go to Paducah and buy something extra, but we could get everything we needed right here in town.
Did the midget store become Davenport Brothers in later
Yes, it
years?
did. It was the Davenport Brothers.
Now, that's when
That's
I
where you
come
came.
into the picture,
Okay.
remembering it.
And we had a 10-cent store when we came here, and 2 or 3 cafes or restaurants we were called. And we had 2 or 3 garages all fixed up, ready to help the cars along.
They even sold, I was told once by a fellow here, that they sold a new car in town, that Buddy Putman sold the Preston.
Yes, that's right. I remember it.
I believe Joe Pace told me that one time. I remember. And of course, I can remember Ivan Jones and Ian Irwin's garage, and
That's right.
and Youngblood had a garage. I thought that Davenport Brothers store was something. They had this millinery shop upstairs, and you could see all kinds of beautiful women's hats and
Yes.
dresses
Lynn Kello
and so
ran it
on.
forever, then Mrs. Gardner,
Ms. Rudy Gardner.
Mrs. Rudy Gardner came from Alabama here to run the store.
And I was so amazed by the shoes. Now, they were on the south wall, as I remember, and there was a ladder that had wheels on it.
They could reach up
And
get
you
shoes.
could roll that ladder anywhere from east to west up and down that wall, and then you could jump up on it, the steps, and climb up and reach shoes all the way to the ceiling.
That was something big for us, wasn't it?
Oh, I thought there's never been anything like that. it was New York, Macy's,
Oh,
Gimbel's,
yes.
all rolled into one as far as I was
Didn't have to
concerned.
go anywhere else for anything.
And you remember the elevator they had. Of course, the paste store had an elevator,
Yes.
too. And you pulled on a rope, as I
You
recall.
weren't able to climb the steps, you could go up.
Go up on the elevator.
Up on the elevator, like we do at Benton Bank now.
Yeah. Oh, I thought we were really something. Hardin was the greatest place in the world in those days. Well, you might remember some of the tragedies around. Do you recall when the Hardin School burned in '37?
Yes, I
Did
saw both of them burn. Saw two. See, we've had two burnouts of school, or three. Is it two or three? The old building burned a long time ago, and they built a new one. And it's not there now. It burned too, didn't it?
Well, yes, the new one burned, 6 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
Not too long.
I remember
That's why
that, of course.
When they established South Marshall, they were out of school here.
I know
They were having school in the churches.
when the 37 fire came, I remember I was not here then because I came at mid-year and they had rebuilt enough that we moved into the building in January of '38. But I heard a lot of tales. I remember Dorothy and others would tell me about they had church or had school at the various churches. Now, I think the high school, or anyway, some of the students were at the building of the Church of Christ, and it had a balcony, because I can remember stories of kids that said that they'd drop chalk down on the heads of kids below or throw paper wads at them or something.
They were down at the Methodist church too.
Yeah.
When we moved to Hardin, the Methodist church was over on by the Church of Christ.
Oh, it was.
And for some reason I reckon the house, it was a frame building and the house was
So they built a new brick
they built a
building.
new brick building down on the corner here.
So I can remember. I thought that was a pretty fancy building. And at that time,
It's been bought by the
Church of God of
Church of God.
some group.
Mhm.
I know that both Church of Christ and the Methodist had brick buildings. When I came to Hardin, the Baptist church was still a frame building. But of course, they built a new building now.
It's a pretty building on the inside now, the Baptist church is. Of course, it's still small, but takes care of its own.
Do you remember your first train ride?
I don't guess I do. It must have been from here to Benton, because that's the only way we went to Benton was on the train. There were 6 passenger trains going both ways.
3 north and 3
3
south
south.
every day.
Every day.
Well, that continued until 1947 when then I think we only had 4 trains a day, 2 north and 2 south. But those trains ran till '47. I went to World War II by getting on the train at Hardin and waving bye to Mom and Dad, and
Of course.
they were crying, of course. And
We did all of our going to Paducah and Benton and Murray on the train. Didn't use the highways at all.
no, the highway from Benton to Murray was built in '29, as I recall,
Something like that.
paved in '33, and there weren't all that many cars then.
No.
I can remember Mr. Holland buying a brand new 1939 Ford 4-door. It was a dark green, wasn't it?
Well, he bought a dark green Plymouth the year we married, which was way back in '32.
Mm-hmm.
And we drove it to Colorado because he had asthma so bad that Dr. Caulfield had told him that if he'd get out of Hardin for a while, maybe he'd feel better, but it didn't cure him. At that time, we had 4 doctors in Hardin.
4 doctors.
4
Dr. Caulfield, Dr.
Hughes.
Hughes,
And Euclid
Euclid Covington.
And Dr. Covington out at Wadesboro.
Uh-huh.
We call him old Dr. Covington.
Now, someone told me that at one time Dr. J.V. Stark was in Hardin,
I don't remember him.
but he moved to Kirksey.
Yeah.
And so they said there were at one time 5 physicians in Hardin. Can you imagine that? And I believe there was a Dr. Puckett at Dexter, someone told me.
Yes, there was a Dr. Puckett at Dexter.
So just another mile away, we had another physician.
But of course, these doctors circulated out in the rural section all around here. They went north, south, east, and west.
There were virtually no hospitals.
No.
Of course, Masons opened the Murray Hospital, 1906? There were virtually no hospitals.
No.
Of course, Masons opened the Murray Hospital, 1906? But it was pretty much for their own use, I guess, privately owned at that time. All right. Do you remember anything about funny stories that have happened to you in your teaching days that you could perhaps share with us?
Not too much. I was always so busy. I had so many children in my room, even when I was teaching at North Marshall. In fact, I had the limit every day. Couldn't have over 150, and I had them every day. 150 children. Faced them every day. Of course, some of them would be absent.
Uh-huh.
But I was always serious with my teaching, and nothing funny happened much.
Well, tell us.
This little boy, as I said a while ago, that's teaching the girls down at Central High School, went to school to me he was in high school at the time that I was teaching at Marshall County High. North Marshall.
Mm-hmm. That's Beck.
Beck.
I believe.
I saw his picture a while ago, and I'm going to call him someday and ask him if he remembers. Of course he will.
Yeah.
He had a brother, too.
All right. What about, we're talking about doctors. Did your parents try to keep you from getting sick by hanging a bag of asafoetida around your neck?
No, they didn't believe in that sort of stuff.
Didn't believe.
No, but I have heard that some people did. But no, they were not believers of that.
I've had several stories of that kind told to me. But your parents evidently were pretty advanced. They brought you here to go to school and so on.
My daddy was dead, and he died when I was 10, and we came here when I was 13.
You remember your first radio?
Can't say as I do. Or television either.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you see them someplace not in your home. I remember the first one we had at home, but that was after I married. And I was 25 when I married.
Well, do you remember anything in particular about events that occurred in your raising of your children that were amusing or so on?
Oh, yes. They were always on the go and wanted to go somewhere. And had a bunch of little girls playing out in the yard all the time with them.
Yeah. So you had 2 girls of your own and Dorothy, a stepdaughter.
Well, yes. Dorothy never lived with us, so Dorothy and Robert lived with their grandmother.
Oh, Miss Heineman.
Miss Heineman,
yes.
She lived just across the railroad from us where the library is now.
Mm-hmm.
And Dorothy was married, and my children were sleeping in the front bedroom. And Bobby, her son, would come and want to play with them, and they'd be out all night, and they'd want to sleep, so they'd holler, "Bobby, go home, Bobby," till I made them hush. That's Dorothy Warren and Bobby Warren I'm talking about. And
well,
I would make them hush and get up and come and play with Bobby because they wanted him to come, but they wanted to sleep too.
Yeah. Well, I see our time's just about up. Is there anything special that you want to be sure we get on the tape before we close off our broadcast?
I think that's enough for today. Thank you, Ray.
Well, it's been a real pleasure talking with you, and we appreciate your cooperation. We've been visiting in Hardin, Kentucky, in the home of Mrs. F.G. Fray, Holland, and widow of the beloved school teacher here for a number of years, Felix Grundy Holland. Some of you may remember his full name. And I'm Ray Mofield, and we're making the tapes for the benefit of the State Archives in Frankfort, for the Pogue Library at Murray State University, and with a grant from Shelby McCallum of WCBL Radio, a copy for the Marshall County Library System as well. That concludes our broadcast for today.